Okay, continuing the theme of DNS-based stuff, we now have Ian Meikle from Nominet. Ian's going to be talking about the latest progress and develops on the UK enum registry.
Hi. Yeah, I'm going to give an update on Nominet's running of the enum registry. Those of you who were at the last Links meeting, this presentation looked very, very similar to the one I gave then. There hasn't been any kind of live progress, but we have moved on. So I'm going to there's a couple of slides in there just to give you an idea of what we've done. What I'm going to talk about is a very brief one-slide overview of what enum is and the problem it's trying to solve and how it all works. A review of the organisational structure where Nominet sits in the serving of enum registration, of offering enum registration services, where we got to and where we're going next. Which one is it? Just click it. Or? Oh, space. Okay, sorry. Okay, so enum's basically an enabling technology for VoIP, or particularly for SIP. It's solving the problem where you've got somebody in company A wants to talk to somebody in company B. They want to route the call IP end to end, and they need to have a way of finding the other person's SIP server. Obviously, you could just hardwire it in, but that doesn't scale. It soon becomes stale. It's a problem that was solved through DNS a long time ago, so enum is just basically an extension to DNS. The way you put phone numbers in is you take a number in international format, remove any leading zeros, swap it round, put dots in between it, and stick it underneath E164.ARPA. So the space that Nominet are allowing registrations in is 4.4.E164.ARPA. The way that enum works in the UK is that Bird have given UKEC, an organisation called UKEC, of which we've got at least one member of UKEC in the room, the authority to run the whole of enum within the UK. They have delegated the actual registry operations to Nominet. There's a couple of other parties involved. There's a group called VAs, Validation Agencies, which I'm going to talk about more later, and the registrars, the people who actually register the phone numbers with us. The differences from the .uk process, there's four major ones. There's no contract and no contact at all between the registry and the registrant. All the registrations come through the registrars. All the registrations have to be validated. Now, what that means is the person who's presenting the phone number has to have the right of use of that phone number before we'll register it in enum. And that has to be done through some kind of lookup process. What that's not saying is that we're checking the identity of the person. They don't have to turn up and show passports or driving license or anything like that. That's beyond the scope of what we're trying to do. What we want to make sure is that the identity is associated with the phone number and that has the right of use of it. You're allowed to register more than one number. You can register a whole number block. There is a slight, there's a different pricing scheme for that. So you're charged one price for a single number and then a much smaller price for any additional numbers in that number block. And we're not allowed to have a who is, because that would be a reverse phone book, which is illegal. So the registration process goes like this. The registrant decides that they want to register the number. They take it to their registrar of choice. The registrar hands off the validation process to a validation agency. It may well be that if the registrar is the telco which owns that number space, it's just a case of them looking it up in their own systems and checking that the association exists. The validation agency produces a token which is digitally signed. It's just a piece of XML that's digitally signed, and that's passed on by the registrar to us through EPP for registration. We check the signature, check that the chain of trust actually exists. One thing we have done since the last talk is set up a process for making sure that chain of trust exists. And the way that it works is that the validation agency, as part of their accreditation process, generates a CSR, a certificate signing request, which is passed to UKEC, who then, to mark the completion of the accreditation process, passes it on to Nominet. We issue a certificate. We've effectively become a certificate authority, a private certificate authority for the validation agencies. Issue the certificate, which then goes back through UKEC, who issue it back to the validation agency. They use the private key that they generated as part of the CSR generation process to sign the token, pass it on to the registrar, who pass it on to Nominet as part of the registration process. And we do all the signature checking and make sure that the certificate's not revoked, that kind of thing. At the moment, the state of play at the moment is that we've done what we call a soft launch of Enum. We've got all the the registration system in place. Because we've only just settled on the VA process, we haven't actually quite finished testing it. In fact, I think testing's going on as we speak, because Dinesh has actually forwarded the first test CSR to Nominet today. We're not able to take registrations at the moment. We can take registrar applications, and we do have a couple of registrars waiting to start submitting things. We're serving the zone, though at the moment there's nothing in there. The thing we need is validation agencies. We did have a public consultation back at the last quarter of last year. It is our hope that registrars will become their own VAs, any of the telcos that become registrars. But just in case, we do need independent validation agencies, and we do have a couple of these already. What that means is, if you're a registrant, you want to register your phone number, you want to do it through a telco that isn't a registrar yet, you'll need to take it to a separate registrar, who will then need to send it to a validation agency who can do some kind of lookup. It's complicated by the fact that there is no sort of single one place you can look to see where the right of use exists. There was talk of Nominet acting as the validation agency of last resort. Because we've now got some independent VAs, we're not planning to do that, though we hold the right to introduce it if market conditions demand that there is an independent VA that's run by Nominet. The problems that you hit when you're trying to validate these numbers is, obviously you've got company number blocks, you've got individuals, you've got mobiles, and there is no one database, like I said, that allows you to find all the associations. Once the CA testing is completed, we will do a full launch, which means that we'll start taking registrations. And it is the date has been set at the moment for the 11th of March, which is coincidentally my wife's birthday. So I might get her a rather unwanted birthday present. One thing that we have noted about Enum is that it definitely needs to be marketed. As part of this, we've joined the Enum Federation. Now, this is different from the UK Enum Federation, which is basically a group of telcos who are interested in carrier Enum rather than user Enum. But this is a group of European Enum registries who've got together. It was being driven by .cz, the Czech registry, and various CCTLDs have already joined it. People who've already got Enum offerings, people like Germany, Austria, and Ireland. We've very recently joined it. It's about raising brand awareness. The idea is that Enum should be as ubiquitous a term as Bluetooth or Wi-Fi when people are talking about voice over IP. And it's all about developing and promoting the business case for Enum, why people would want to get Enum registrations. The first meeting is scheduled for the end of this month. Okay, we want as many registrars as possible. We're running a series of events to publicise Enum and try and get to the kind of people who we want to be the registrars. If you go along to one of our registrar information days, it lasts for, like I said, for a whole day. So there's much more on Enum and what it entails becoming, what is entailed in becoming a registrar. That's really, there's a kind of competency test that we run. You're required to take out some kind of liability insurance, because obviously if you start putting people's phone numbers in DNS and then disconnecting them, or we want to make sure that we're not ending up with a bill. And there is a small admin fee as well if you want to become a registrar. But if you are interested in it, I advise that you go along to one of them. They're held twice a year, or they will be held twice a year. We've held one recently in Leeds. If you go to the URL that's on the screen, that has details on the most recent event, and will have details soon of the events coming up in 2009. Is there any questions? When I last gave this presentation, it was in November, hence the facial hair.
Yep. What are the plans for signing 4.4.e164.ARPA?
At the moment, we don't have any plans for it. What we want to do first is sign.uk. Slightly off topic, but seeing as Dave was talking about it before, because we have the second level domains, we have no problems with signing.uk, and we're going to use NSEC for that because it's a small zone anyway, and it's publicly available over AXFR for whoever wants it. The second level domains are not publicly available, and for Core UK they're much, much larger. So we want to use NSEC 3 for that. We've been waiting really for Boyne to have the support in it, but we also want to use .uk as a test case to make sure that we've got the signing process in place and then roll it out. 4.4.e164 at ARPA would be the next one along after we've started signing the second level domains.
Hi. I see what you're saying about registering number blocks and a small extra charge per number, but there are people like us that have corporate number blocks. So we've got the smallest corporate number block. You can get 10,000 numbers. And we just want one entry, a name server delegation to our name server at that level in enum. Any possibility of that? Because I'm not going to pay for another 9,999 extra number fees on my 10,000 number block registration, surely.
I think that's more in UKEX.
Actually, no, it's Nominet, because Nominet came up with the fees.
Did you? I don't know. I'll ask the question.
Yeah, I think looking at the history of this, I don't think, or I can't remember there being any provision for that type of thing. The thing is that the per number, per subsequent number registrations are actually very, very cheap. So you're not talking of pounds per number, you're talking of pennies. So
I'd still rather not have 10,000 entries in Nominet. I'd rather have just a delegation to my name server.
Sure.
What if the users want to register?
No, sorry, this is corporate numbering block. They aren't users. This is a corporate number block, which means all of those numbers are for us to use internally and not allowed to be sold to end users. Right. It's an entire number block direct from Ofcom to an end user, and it's the smallest block they do.
Okay, in which case, may I suggest that you write to UKEC and write to us at UKEC, and we'll take it forward with the Joint Review Committee.
Okay, I think we've mentioned it every time anyone's ever asked us, so it's not
okay,
a new
no,
idea.
Sorry, this is the first time hearing
Okay.
about it, so, okay.
Hi, Tim Bray from Purview. I just want to ask what practical steps the validation agencies do. Do they ring the number up and ask who's there, or how does it actually work in practice?
That has been talked about as a method, or sending SMS texts. We may have to become a validation agency of last resort, like I say, and we have done a bit of research about that. And we were talking about just those kind of things, you know, picking a random number from a number block, which has got its problems because obviously you don't necessarily allocate all the numbers in a block. It's not an easy problem, which is why I'm quite keen that we don't become the validation.
It's not really working at the moment, or people aren't doing it.
Sorry, I didn't catch that, Tim.
I said that's probably why it's not really got quite going yet.
No. Yeah.
Yeah, on that point, there's obviously the possibility of abuse of this. And even if you do phone someone up, someone wants to register one number, and you phone them and confirm, yes, they really are on that number, and maybe you phone it several times or get them to phone you. Those sorts of steps are fine until you realise it's a DDI in an office and someone's just registered enum for that, when the number really belongs to a block that's owned by the company. And I can't see how they're going to get around that, and who's going to be responsible for what when that happens. oh, it's a payphone outside your house.
Yeah, it's a valid point, and it's certainly an issue for the validation agencies, and I think it's part of the. Did you want to comment on that?
This actually falls under policy, and there's various things. We've been very careful when it comes to writing the code of practice for validation agents, and the type of bonds that the validation agents have to fall under. We've seriously looked at this, and the thing is that there are various different methods of doing validation, and when a validation agent does approach us to be accredited, we do ask them what their processes are, which processes they're going to use, because as UKEC we have to know these things, and before they start using a new process we will have to know about those. With respect to the scenario that you brought up, in that case, to me, that's a manual validation, in which case then there will be paperwork involved, and there will need to be bills and things going left, right and centre.
And I've thought of another question. There's no mechanism, as far as I know, for telcos telling anybody that a number is no longer allocated to someone. So yes, you could validate a number and then move out, or it ceased, and the next occupant of the house, let's say, might not have ever heard of Enum, let alone know what to do or be prepared to go and pay someone to get that fixed. Yet half their calls are suddenly being diverted to the person who has registered because some people are using Enum to fire calls through to them. What processes are going to exist for unvalidating and removing numbers for people who have no clue and don't want to pay anything?
Who would generate the deregistration request then?
That's what I'm saying, yes. I mean, if I take over a phone number in a house, I move in, take over the phone number, the previous occupant had legitimately registered that with Enum, and I move in, and I don't even have a computer, let's say. I know nothing about it, I just want my phone to work. And I find not all calls get to me, because some of them are being routed by Enum and arriving at the previous occupant, who doesn't care that he's getting them, or might even want to get them. And how do I get over that? I complain to my telco that calls don't get through to me. My telco, can they deregister it? How's that going to happen? What's the process in place for that?
There is a complaints process that's being drawn up for exactly things like this. With respect to deregistering, it does, in most cases, it does fall as the responsibility of the person who's no longer going to have that number to deregister it. But in cases where that doesn't happen, there is a complaints process in place, and you can go to your telco, and the telco will raise it with the validation agents. One of the other things that's being looked at is doing annual validation on blocks and numbers. So.
Okay, all the questions? Okay, thank you very much, Ian.
Thanks.